A rabbi and a priest met up after a year apart. The rabbi chuckled. "Wow, you've put on some weight since last time." The priest grinned. "Yeah, I found a new trick. I go to a restaurant, eat as much as I want, and when the bill comes, I tell them I already paid." The rabbi raised an eyebrow. "But won't they question you?" "That's when I say, 'How dare you doubt a man of faith?' Works like a charm. I walk out without paying." The rabbi was impressed and decided to try it himself. Later that day, at his favorite kosher restaurant, he devoured 5 plates. When the waiter brought the bill, the rabbi said confidently, "Oh, I already paid." The waiter frowned. "I'm pretty sure you didn't, sir." The rabbi leaned in. "I'm a rabbi. How dare you question a man of faith?" Flustered, the waiter apologized. "I'm so sorry, sir. Must be a mistake. You're free to go." But an hour later, the rabbi was still sitting there. The waiter approached, puzzled. "Sir, why haven't you left?" The rabbi smiled. "I'm waiting for my change." Mitch was at the racetrack, losing badly, when he noticed a priest step onto the track and bless the forehead of a horse lining up for the 4th race. To Mitch's surprise, the long-shot horse won. Curious, Mitch watched the priest again before the 5th race. Sure enough, the priest blessed another horse, and once again the blessed horse won. Mitch rushed to the betting window and placed a small bet on the next horse the priest blessed, and it won, too. Race after race, the priest kept blessing long shots, and each time the horse won. Mitch was on fire, raking in serious cash. By the final race, Mitch was confident he'd hit the jackpot. He withdrew all his savings, ready to bet it all. The priest came out again, but this time he blessed an old nag, the longest shot of the day. Mitch noticed the priest also blessed the horse's eyes, ears, and hooves. "This is it," Mitch thought, and he placed every last cent on the horse. The race began, and the old nag didn't just lose, it came in dead last. Devastated, Mitch stormed down to the priest. "Father, what happened? Every horse you blessed won, until now. I lost everything." The priest shook his head sadly. "That's the problem with people like you. You don't know the difference between a simple blessing and last rites." A priest was called away for an emergency, but not wanting to leave the confessional unattended, he called his rabbi friend from across the street. "I wouldn't know what to do," the rabbi protested. "It's easy," the priest assured him. "I'll walk you through it." So they sat in the confessional together. Soon a woman entered and said, "Father, forgive me, for I have sinned." The priest asked, "What did you do?" "I committed adultery," she replied. "How many times?" "3. Say 2 Hail Marys, put $5 in the box, and go in peace," the priest instructed. The rabbi nodded, catching on. A man came in next with the same confession. 3 times adultery. The priest gave the same penance, 2 Hail Marys and $5. The rabbi smiled. "I think I've got this," and the priest left. Moments later, another woman entered. "Father, forgive me, for I have sinned." The rabbi asked, "What did you do?" "I committed adultery." "How many times?" he inquired. "Just once." The rabbi thought for a moment, then said, "Well, go do it 2 more times. We're running a special this week. 3 for $5. After a rough week, Larry was worried about his upcoming hearing, so he decided to attend a revival meeting, hoping the preacher could help. During the service, the preacher asked if anyone needed prayer. Larry raised his hand, and the preacher called him forward. "What can I pray for, Larry?" the preacher asked. "I need you to pray for my hearing," Larry replied. The preacher nodded solemnly, placed one hand on Larry's ear and the other on his head, and began to pray with great passion. He prayed for several minutes, calling on divine intervention to help Larry. Finally, the preacher stepped back and asked, "Well, Larry, how's your hearing now?" Larry looked confused and said, "I'm not sure, Reverend. It's not until next Wednesday." An elderly priest was chatting with a younger priest about recent changes to the church. "You know," the old priest said, "replacing the first 4 pews with plush theater seats was brilliant. The front rows fill up first now." The young priest smiled. "Glad it worked, Father. And adding more upbeat music with that rock and roll gospel choir. The place is packed every Sunday." "Thank you, Father. I'm glad you're open to new ideas." The old priest nodded. "I am, but I think you've gone too far with the drive-through confessional." But, Father, the young priest protested, confessions and donations have nearly doubled since we started it. I know, the old priest sighed, but the neon sign that says toot and tell or go to hell has to go. The boy goes to confession. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I was with a loose girl. The priest leans in. Joey Pagano, is that you? Yes, Father. And who was the girl? I can't say, Father. I don't want to ruin her reputation. The priest tries to guess. Was it Tina Minetti? No, Father. Was it Nancy Connor? My lips are sealed. Judy Cohen? I can't say. Kate Taqueno? Rose DeMarco? I'll never tell. The priest sighs. I admire your discretion, Joey, but you must atone. No altar boy duties for 4 months. Go and sin no more. Joey returns to his pew, where his friend Franco asks, So what did you get? Joey grins. 4 months off and 5 solid leads. A man had 2 sons, Jackson, sharp as a tack, and Blake, well, let's just say he was more spoon than knife. Despite that, their father loved them both dearly. One day, the father passed away. Jackson stuck in an important business meeting called Blake. Blake, I can't get there right away, but I need you to handle Dad's funeral. Use my credit card. Spare no expense. Make sure he looks his absolute best. Jackson hesitated, knowing Blake's track record, but had no other choice. Surprisingly, Blake pulled it off. The funeral was tasteful. Dad looked great, and Jackson was impressed that Blake even kept it under budget. A few months later, Jackson noticed something odd on his credit card statement. $300 charges every month. He called Blake. Hey, Blake, I'm not accusing you or anything, but are you still using my card? I see $300 coming out monthly. Blake sounded offended. Of course not. I'd never steal from you. Okay, but what are these charges then? Blake paused. Oh, that's probably for Dad's tux rental. You told me to get him the best, so I rented the nicest suit in town. There was once a cruel king who executed anyone at his whim. One day, when a minister gave him bad advice, the king sentenced him to be thrown to his vicious, starving guard dogs. The minister pleaded, Your Majesty, I've served you loyally for 10 years. You do this over one mistake. But the king was unmoved. Desperate, the minister begged, At least grant me 10 days before my execution. The king, curious, agreed. For the next 10 days, the minister visited the royal kennels, feeding the dogs, bathing them, and treating them with kindness. By the end of the 10 days, the once ravenous beasts adored him. When the day of execution came, the minister was thrown to the dogs, but instead of attacking, they wagged their tails, licked his hands, and played with him. The king was stunned. What happened to my ferocious dogs? The minister stood and calmly said, I cared for them for just 10 days, and they didn't forget. I served you faithfully for 10 years, and you forgot at my first mistake. The king fell silent, reflecting on his cruelty. Then declared, Fine lesson. The next day, he replaced the dogs with crocodiles. An old woman took her husband to the doctor. After a quick check, the doctor sighed and said, I'm sorry your husband is dead. Shocked, the woman protested. I don't believe it. Are you sure? There must be more tests you can do. The doctor shrugged. Well, if you insist. He opened the door and called, Send in Mrs. Fluffkins. A black cat sauntered in, leapt onto the table, casually walked over the husband's body, swatted his face, then hopped down and meowed twice before leaving. Just as I thought, said the doctor. Dead. Send in Walter. A Labrador trotted in, sniffed the man's hand, then looked at the doctor with sad eyes, shook his head, and patted out. Yep, definitely dead. Send in Colin. Moments later, an Aussie in safari gear burst in, binoculars around his neck. He took one look at the body and bellowed, Oi, love, your bloke's bloody dead! And stormed out. The doctor nodded. Thanks, Colin, one more. An elderly woman walked in, peered at the body through thick glasses, typed furiously at an old typewriter, and handed the doctor a card. Dead. The doctor, now certain, grabbed a stool, smashed it over the husband's body. No reaction. He jotted something on his clipboard and turned to the widow. I'm sorry for your loss. He's definitely gone. The woman, dazed, took the paperwork to the front desk. The receptionist glanced at it and said gently, "I'm very sorry. That'll be $32,000. $32,000? The woman gasped. That's outrageous. Why so much? The receptionist checked the bill. Well, there's the $100 doctor's fee, but then you insisted on a CAT scan, a lab report, a colonoscopy, a mammogram, and a stool analysis. Jack Nicholas is having a drink at a bar with Stevie Wonder. So, Stevie, Jack asks, how's the music career going? Not bad, Stevie replies. My latest album hit the top 10, so I'm pretty happy. How's golf treating you? Still swinging, Jack chuckles. Not winning as much, but making decent money. Been working on my swing lately. Stevie nods. Yeah, I know the feeling. When my swing's off, I take a break, think it over, and I'm back on track. Jack stares at him, puzzled. Wait, you play golf? Of course. Been playing for years, Stevie says, smiling. But you're blind. How do you play? Stevie laughs. No offense taken. I get my caddy to stand in the middle of the fairway and call out. I follow the sound of his voice and hit the ball toward him. Same thing on the green. He kneels by the hole and calls to me so I can line up my putt. Jack is stunned. That's incredible. What's your handicap? I play off scratch, Stevie says casually. Jack, still amazed, grins. We've got to play around sometime. Stevie smiles slyly. Sure, but I only play for money, never less than $100,000 a hole. Nicholas thinks for a moment, confident in his skills. All right, I'm in. When do you want to play? Stevie leans in. Any night next week works for me. A couple was golfing at an exclusive course lined with million-dollar homes. On the third tee, the husband warned, Honey, be careful. One bad shot and we're paying for someone's window. The wife nodded, teed up, and smashed the ball straight through the biggest house's window with a loud crash. The husband groaned, I told you. All right, let's go apologize and see how much this is going to cost. They walked up to the house, knocked on the door, and heard a voice call, Come on in. Inside, they found shattered glass everywhere and a broken bottle lying on the floor. On the couch sat a man, smiling. Did you break my window? He asked. Yes, and we're so sorry, the husband replied. The man waved it off. No need to apologize. I'm a genie. That bottle was my prison for 1,000 years. Your golf ball set me free. As a thank you, I'll grant each of you one wish, and I'll keep the last one for myself. The husband's eyes lit up. Amazing! I want $1 million a year for the rest of my life. Done, said the genie. And you? He asked, turning to the wife. She smiled. I want a house in every country in the world. Granted, the genie stretched and sighed. Now for my wish. After 1,000 years trapped in that bottle, I'd really like to sleep with your wife. The husband hesitated, but then said, Well, we're rich now and have homes everywhere. Sure, why not? The genie took the wife upstairs, and after 2 hours of passionate wish-granting, they lay side by side. The genie looked over and asked, So, how old is your husband? 38, she replied. The genie laughed. And he still believes in genies? That's adorable. A Scotsman stranded on a desert island for over 10 years spots a strange speck on the horizon. It's not a ship, he mutters. As it gets closer, he rules out a raft or boat. Suddenly, a stunning blonde in a wetsuit and scuba gear emerges from the surf. She walks up and asks, Tell me, how long has it been since you had a cigarette? 10 years, he exclaims. She unzips a waterproof pocket on her sleeve and pulls out a fresh pack. The Scotsman lights one, takes a deep drag, and sighs. Oh, that hits the spot, she smiles. And how long since you've had a good scotch? His eyes widen. 10 years. She unzips another pocket, pulls out a flask, and hands it over. He takes a swig and nearly cries. 'Tis liquid gold. Then, with a sly smile, she slowly unzips the front of her wetsuit. And tell me, she purrs, how long has it been since you played around? The Scotsman drops to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Oh, sweet Jesus, don't tell me you've got golf clubs in there, too. On a blustery day, a rabbi was walking down the street when a fierce gust of wind snatched his hat and sent it tumbling down the road. He chased after it, but the wind kept it just out of reach. A young non-Jewish man saw the scene, sprinted after the hat, and finally caught it. He handed it back to the rabbi, who was deeply grateful. "Thank you, young man," the rabbi said, pressing $20 into his hand. "May you be blessed with luck in all you do." The young man, feeling lucky, decided to head to the racetrack. With the rabbi's blessing, how can I go wrong? He thought. At the track, he looked over the program. In the 5th race, there was a horse named Top Hat with 100-to-1 odds. Remembering the rabbi's hat, he bet the entire $20 on it, and Top Hat won. In the next race, he noticed a horse named Bowler at 30-to-1 odds. Another kind of hat, this has to be a sign. He bet all his winnings again, and Bowler came in first, excited. He called his father that evening. "Dad, you won't believe my day. A rabbi's blessing led me to the track, and I turned $20 into thousands." He told the story of Top Hat and Bowler. "Wow," said his father. "So where's the money?" "Well, I lost it all on the last race," the son admitted. "There was a horse named Chateau. Since that means hat in French, I bet everything on him." His father groaned. "You fool! Chapeau means hat in French, chateau mean castle." The son sighed. "Yeah, I figured that out too late. A Spanish horse named Sombrero won the race." A Japanese company and a Swedish company agreed to a rowing competition as a publicity stunt. Both teams trained hard, but on race day, the Japanese team won by a full kilometer. The Swedish company was stunned. Determined to save face, they demanded a rematch the following year. Management immediately formed a task force to investigate the loss. After months of analysis, the report came back. The Japanese team had one person steering and the rest rowing. The Swedish team had one person rowing while everyone else steered. Embarrassed but determined, Swedish management hired a consultant. After another lengthy review, the consultant confirmed, "Too many people steering, not enough rowing." Swift action was taken. For the rematch, the Swedish team was restructured to include 2 steersmen, 2 senior steersmen, a captain, and 1 rower. To boost morale, the rower was enrolled in a performance-based bonus scheme. Race day arrived, and the Japanese team won again, this time by 3 kilometers. Back at the Swedish company, management convened to assess the situation. The decision was clear. The rower was fired for poor performance. Managers received hefty bonuses for their innovative restructuring, and a new plan was put in place. Next year, they'd design a better boat. A woman goes to the doctor because she has pain in her backside. Doctor: "Where exactly does it hurt?" Woman: "Right at the entrance." The doctor sighs and replies, "Well, ma'am, if you keep calling it an entrance, it's bound to keep hurting." A woman joins a country club and one day overhears a group of guys talking about their golf game. She chimes in, "I played on my college golf team. I was pretty good. Mind if I join you next week?" The guys exchange awkward glances. None of them really want her to join, but don't want to seem rude. Finally, one says, "Sure, but we tee off at 6:30 a.m. sharp." He figures the early start will scare her off. "Sounds great," she replies, "though I might be 15 minutes late." They roll their eyes but agree. To their surprise, she shows up at 6:30 on the dot, plays right-handed, and shoots an incredible 2 under par, beating them all. She's fun, easygoing, and clearly talented. Impressed, they invite her back. The next week, she's there at 6:30 again. But this time, she plays left-handed and still beats them, finishing at even par. The guys are floored. "How do you play so well with both hands?" one of them finally asks. She smiles. "I'm ambidextrous. I switch it up depending on the day." Curiosity gets the better of them. After the 3rd game, where she narrowly wins again, one guy asks, "But how do you decide which hand to play with?" She blushes and grins. "Well, before I head out in the morning, I pull back the covers on my husband while he's still asleep. If his, points to the right, I play right-handed. If it points to the left, I play left-handed." The guys burst out laughing. Then one, still chuckling, asks, "What if it's pointing straight up?" She winks. "Then I'm 15 minutes late." A trucker pulls into a roadside diner and takes a seat. When the brand new blonde waitress approaches, he says, "I'll have 3 flat tires, a pair of headlights, and a set of running boards." The waitress, not wanting to look clueless, heads to the kitchen and tells the cook, "There's a guy out there who just ordered 3 flat tires, 2 headlights, and running boards. Is he nuts or does he think we're an auto shop?" The cook chuckles and says, "Nah, that's diner lingo. 3 flat tires are pancakes, headlights are sunny-side-up eggs, and running boards are strips of crispy bacon." "Oh," the waitress says, relieved. Then, as she's plating the order, she ladles a bowl of baked beans and brings it out with the food. The trucker looks at the bowl and asks, "What's this for?" She smiles and says, "Well, I figured while you're waiting for your flat tires, headlights, and running boards, you might as well gas up." A few decades ago, a quirky restaurant made a bold promise. "We'll serve you anything you want. If we can't, you get $5,000 on their house." A man walking by sees the sign and scoffs, "Yeah, right." But curiosity, and the chance at $5,000, gets the better of him. He walks in and is seated by a cheerful waiter. "What can I get for you today, sir?" the waiter asks. The man smirks and says, "I'll have an elephant's ear and a muffin." The waiter, unfazed, replies, "One moment, sir," and disappears into the kitchen. Minutes tick by. The man leans back, smug. They'll never pull this off, he thinks, already imagining the crisp bills in his hand. But then the waiter returns, looking slightly flustered. "Sir, I apologize, but could you specify what kind of elephant would you like the ear from?" The man freezes, caught off guard. An Indian elephant?" "Very good." The waiter nods and heads back to the kitchen. A minute later, he returns again. "And would you prefer the left or right ear?" The man starts to sweat. Left ear. Excellent choice," the waiter says and vanishes again. The man now panics. "Oh, no! What if they actually have this? How much is this going to cost me?" 5 tense minutes later, the waiter comes back carrying a silver platter and an envelope. He sets them down with a polite smile. "Here's your order, sir, and your $5,000. Unfortunately, we're out of muffins." Many years ago, a wealthy woman with a passion for antiques found a beautiful vase during her travels. She adored it so much that she decided to paint her entire display room the exact color of the vase. She announced a generous reward to any painter who could match the color perfectly. Dozens of painters came, studied the vase, mixed their paints, but none could get it quite right. One day, a quiet painter arrived. He studied the vase for just a minute, then confidently mixed a batch of paint. When he presented it, the woman was thrilled. It was a flawless match. She paid him handsomely, and word of his talent spread, making him a wealthy man. Years later, as he was retiring, his son asked, "Dad, I've always wondered, how did you match that vase so perfectly?" The old man smiled, leaned in, and whispered, "Can you keep a secret?" "Of course. I painted the vase." John went to visit his 90-year-old grandfather in a remote part of Saskatchewan. They spent the evening catching up, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. The next morning, John's grandfather made him a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, and toast. But as John picked up his plate, he noticed a strange, film-like residue on it. "Grandpa, are these plates clean?" he asked hesitantly. His grandfather waved him off. "They're as clean as cold water can get 'em. Just eat up, sonny." John shrugged and ate his meal. At lunchtime, his grandfather grilled up some hamburgers, but once again, John noticed his plate had tiny specks of dried food stuck to the edges. "Grandpa, are you sure these plates are clean?" he asked again. Without looking up, the old man grumbled. "I told you before, sonny. They're as clean as cold water can get 'em. Now quit fussing and eat." Later that afternoon, as John was heading to his car, his grandfather's dog suddenly blocked his path, growling and baring its teeth. "Grandpa, your dog won't let me pass," John called out. Still glued to his football game, the old man shouted back, "Cold water, get out of the way!" A man and his wife were spending the day at the zoo. She was wearing a loose-fitting pink dress, sleeveless with thin straps, while he stuck to his usual jeans and t-shirt. As they walked past the ape exhibit, a massive silverback gorilla suddenly locked eyes on the wife. He went wild, grunting, pounding his chest and shaking the bars like he was ready to break out. The husband, finding this amusing, chuckled and said, "Try puckering your lips and wiggling your hips. See what happens." She played along, and the gorilla got even more excited, jumping and hollering. "Now let one of your straps fall," the husband suggested. She hesitated, but did it. The gorilla practically lost his mind, shaking the cage and roaring. "Okay, now show a little thigh and fan your dress at him," the husband added with a grin. As soon as she did, the gorilla went completely berserk, flipping, swinging, and pounding on the enclosure like he was about to tear it down. Then, with a sly smile, the husband calmly unlocked the cage door and said, "Now go in there and tell him you have a headache." An engineer, a physicist, and a mathematician are imprisoned, each in separate cells. Days go by without food, and eventually the warden decides to check on them. He and a guard arrive at the first cell, the engineer's, but it's empty. There's a hole in the solid concrete wall. "How did he do that?" asks the guard. The warden inspects the room and replies, "He fashioned a pickaxe out of the utensils we gave him and dug his way out. They moved to the next cell, the physicist's. It's also empty, with another hole in the wall. Again, the warden inspects and says, he calculated the wall's structural weaknesses and used a rock to strike the precise spot until it gave way. Finally, they reach the mathematician's cell. He's still there, but lying lifeless on the floor from starvation. Papers are scattered on his bed. The guard frowns. "I thought for sure he'd have figured a way out, too." The warden picks up the papers, scans them, then smirks. "Oh, he did? What do you mean?" The warden holds up the notes. "He spent all his time writing a flawless proof demonstrating escape was possible, but never actually did it." "At my first job, I worked at an orange juice factory, but I got canned. I just couldn't concentrate. Then I became a lumberjack, but I just couldn't hack it, so they gave me the axe. After that, I tried being a tailor, but I wasn't suited for it. Plus, it was only a so-so job. Next, I worked at Starbucks, but I had to quit. I got tired of the same old grind. I even tried being a chef, hoping it would add some spice to my life, but I just didn't have the time. Then I worked at a deli, but no matter how I sliced it, I just couldn't cut the mustard. My best gig was as a musician, but eventually I realized I wasn't noteworthy. I studied to be a doctor, but I didn't have the patience. I got a job at a shoe factory, but I just didn't fit in. Tried my luck as a fisherman, but I couldn't live on my net income. I even worked for a pool cleaning company, but the job was too draining. Then I got hired at a gym, but they said I wasn't fit for the job. After years of trying, I finally became a historian, only to realize there was no future in it. My last gig was at a muffler factory, but it was too exhausting. So I retired. And you know what? I found I'm perfect for the job. One day, Pete complained to his friend, "Man, my head is killing me. I think I need to see a doctor." His friend replied, "Forget that. There's a new computer at the drugstore that can diagnose anything. Faster and cheaper than a doctor. Just tell it your problem. Pour in a urine sample, and for only $20, it'll tell you what's wrong and how to fix it." Skeptical but curious, Pete gave it a shot. He filled a jar with his urine, went to the drugstore, found the machine, poured in the sample, and slid in a $20 bill. The computer buzzed, whirred, lights flashed, and then a slip of paper popped out. "Diagnosis. You have migraines. Get more rest. Drink plenty of fluids and avoid bright lights and stress. Come back in 2 weeks. Pete was blown away. But as he thought about it, he wondered, could this thing be fooled? Determined to test it, he concocted a mix. Some tap water, a stool sample from his dog, urine from his wife and teenage daughter, and, just for fun, a little motor oil from his car. He returned to the machine, poured in the bizarre mixture, paid his $20, and waited eagerly. The computer buzzed, lights flashed, and then out came the result. Analysis. Your tap water has too much waste in it. Your dog has ringworms. Your teenage daughter is pregnant. Your wife has been unfaithful with 5 different men. Your car needs a new radiator, and you still have migraines. And now you know why. A psychologist was doing his morning rounds when he walked into a patient's room and found one man sitting on the floor, vigorously sawing at a piece of wood with the side of his hand. Above him, another patient was hanging upside down from the ceiling by his foot. The doctor, trying to make sense of the scene, asked the man on the floor, "What exactly are you doing?" The patient snapped back, "Isn't it obvious? I'm sawing this piece of wood in half." The doctor paused, then pointed up. "And what about your friend up there?" "Oh, him, he thinks he's a light bulb," the patient replied, rolling his eyes. Concerned, the doctor said, "Well, don't you think you should help him down before he hurts himself?" The patient looked horrified. "What? And sit here in the dark?"